Hey everyone, I'm 10 Types, and recently I made a video that you all seem to really like about or not that recently, this was like a month ago. I should have done this sooner, but I did a video about every Pokemon TCG deck's biggest weakness, or at least the most played ones. And I was going to do a top 10 list this week, but there's not too much to say that I haven't said last week, so I decided instead, this week I'm going to be going over every deck's biggest strength, or I guess the top deck's biggest strengths, and I will, of course, give commentary on the best decks. Some of these strengths are bigger than others, but at the end of the day, all the decks I'm going to be talking about in today's video are worth running, and depending on what you want in a deck, you could think that it is the best deck for you at the very least. And so I think a big reason to choose to play a deck is because of its strength. And so, in addition to actually giving these strengths, I think it will help you find a deck that you want to play. And if you don't play Pokemon TCG, a great way to do that is on Pokemon TCG Live. I just want to mention that I don't think I've said it lately. Pokemon TCG Live, obviously, for those of you who know, it isn't the best, but it is a great way to learn the game, start playing the game, and really keep playing the game as long as you can do it. So yeah, but with that out of the way, oh, and last thing, subscribe if you enjoy the content as well, like and comment. That all really helps the content and helps the channel as I continue to grow. And I got some big plans coming up. But let's hop in. I am here on Limitless as well, or Play.Limitless, and this has a bunch of data. Starting with the decks that aren't super highly played, Espathozadu, I do think Espathozadu is a very good deck. This is the best counter deck, in my opinion, and I would highly recommend you play it with Scissor instead of Bayonet EX. Bayonet EX is not that good, at least not with this deck. But the best thing about this deck is it's a really good counter deck, and notably it beats Charizard EX. Charizard EX is, at least on ladder, I mean, even in tournament, it's played really highly. And yeah, so if you're able to beat that, that's really good. It can also beat some of the basic focus decks, or specifically like the ancient based basic decks and the future based basic decks, which we will talk about. And also it can beat Chimpa with Scissor if you put that in, so that's nice. But moving up, Great Tusk Mill. This is a deck that I know some people like a lot because it's a mill deck. It's really fun to mill out your opponent's deck. It's not the most powerful, but it does have the ability to, or the attack that lets you mill cards from your opponent's deck. It is really the only mill deck in the game. There are certain options. Snorlax Controller, Snorlax Stall does have milling options, and so does Pidgeot Control, or Pidgeot like box control, and some other decks have some mill options, but Great Tusk Mill is really a mill deck. So if you want to play mill, this is 100% the deck to play. Then with Snorlax slash Pidgeot, any control deck really. Um, yeah, Pidgeot, you have a lot of options and you just control, right? Control, and the main idea of control for those of you who don't know is to stop your opponent from, like to remove their resources, and then with stall is to stop them from attacking. And so pretty much you want to slow the game down, and then you get to you control the pace of the game, control what your opponent's doing, and of course control what you're doing, and then eventually you'll probably deck them out. So it is somewhat mill in that aspect as well. Some of the control decks do take prizes. It's a mixed bag, but overall, if you want a really high ceiling deck as well, it's a great deck because it is very complicated. It does have that higher skill floor as well, which is a bit of a downside, but if you're interested in getting into control, Snorlax is easier to learn, and then Pidgeot has that higher skill ceiling as well. Gholdengo and Dialga-Matang. Gholdengo can do big damage. There are a number of other decks that do it, but Gholdengo is one. And then, or it can do essentially, it can one-shot everything. And then Dialga-Matang can take it back-to-back turns. They're good attackers, but again, they're not the decks we're going to be focusing on. But then cracking into the top 10 most played, Other is not one deck. It is I don't actually know what Other is mostly. It used to be, yeah, so there's a lot of Charizard, which, Charizard's pretty highly played, which we'll get to. But, oh, and then also one last deck before those top 10, Arceus V-Star, specifically the Arceus boxes or Arceus pile decks or whatever you want to call them. Not Arceus Giratina, but all the other ones. They have some versatility, but they have a lot of consistency as well. They're pretty nice decks all around. They're pretty well-rounded. We'll talk more about Arceus and then also some of the toolbox decks, and it fits in between those. But the first deck in the top 10 most played is going to be Roaring Moon to Dunsparce. I haven't been a massive fan of this deck, to be honest, but of course the big thing is, and the best thing about it is you got Roaring Moon EX, which its first attack just one-shots everything. Technically, your opponent can play a special energy to stop it, but you can actually counter that with a stadium. So, or other things. There are a number of ways, including enhanced hammer in the next set. It's not out yet, but it will be coming out. But yeah, Roaring Moon is just it just one shots everything, and that's its best thing. It's really good, and there's not really anything you can do about it other than trade hopefully positively if you're a single price deck. But it just one shots everything, and that's really good. It one shots everything without a ton of effort. Next, we got Archus Gutina. Archus Gutina is, I guess the way I describe it is it's good against pretty much everything. It's pretty solid. Notably, it has the Barrel engine, a pretty thick Barrel engine. Bidoof, I should say, is immune to bench damage, not damage counters, but it's immune to Radiant Greninja, and then Barrel will not get one-shotted by Radiant Greninja either. And so you have that like safety. So pretty much if your opponent tries to mess with their hand late game, you should be fine. And in the early game, you have Arceus V-Star, which will allow you to, set up. You can use your V-Star power. You can use it late game as well, but the big thing is in early game Arceus V-Star to set up. And so you have a lot of consistency and a lot of options. Oh, sorry, it ripped my voice. And then you have Guillotine V-Star. And Guillotine V-Star hits 280. This isn't a number that's one-shotting everything, but it's doing big damage, one-shotting most things. And then you do have the options for a few attacks. We see Iron Leaves EX, Radiant Guard for Switch, Maximum Belt, Lost Vacuum, and Lost City is also a bit of attack, and as well as Jet Energy. So you have options for attacks. They're not like required or forced into the deck, but it's not like you can't play them. There's some decks where you just don't really have the room, but in this deck you 100% have it. So it's I'd say it's resilient is probably the word I'd use. Might be the one in the thumbnail. We'll see. But yeah, because I do thumbnails after. But yeah, Arceus is just like a very solid deck. I know a lot of people who like it who just like it because it does what it does. Obviously, you have the potential to miss, but it's unlikely with the V-Star. Like, you need to miss the V-Star. If you get the V-Star, you're set, and it's not that hard to get. Just a really solid deck. Next up, we have Lost Zone Box, and the best part about this deck is it's really versatile. It You have a lot of different attacking options. I think the deck's stagnated a little bit, but you still have a lot of options. But you have like over 5 different attackers, or you have six. That's over 5 different attackers. You can technically attack with everything in the deck, and so you just have a ton of different options. And pretty much whatever your opponent has, you could play attack to beat them, and that's what makes this deck so good. You have Roaring Moon EX, which can one-shot everything, as I said. You have Hoopa EX, which can counter Iron Hands EX and certain things. You have Iron Hands EX itself to counter single prizes. You have Cramorant to counter certain single prizes in other scenarios, and just be good in. Let's go against Roaring Moon. You have Radiant Greninja and Sableye to spread to disrupt decks, or I guess like punish decks that play lots of single prizes without bench protection. And you have Manaphy to protect your bench, Spiritomb as like a shield, like stopping Minion V and Rotom V. You have Iron Bundle to force their opponents active to the bench. You just have all these different Pokemon options. There are other ones you could play as well. You could run different energy types, and you could power up really any Pokemon in the entire game. You could pretty much put anything in Lost Zone. I've seen all sorts of stuff, but the big thing is a lot of different basic Pokemon, but you can just tech it out to exactly how you want it, make it super versatile. It's a really good deck, and it's a really fun deck, and you just have all these different options. It's like the exact opposite of Arceus Giratina, pretty much. Then you have Ancient Box. This deck is a single prize deck. It's a true single prize deck. All the Pokemon are single prizers, and you just hit solid amounts of damage. You have enough HP to survive sometimes as well. It's not like some single prize decks where you die. Like, for example, Espathra Zadu, your opponent can take 4 prizes with a Sableye, theoretically, which is not good. That will not be happening with this deck, though. You have enough HP to not just die instantly all the time, but at the same time, you also have a very solid damage output. Your deck, you're only going to give up 1 prize every single turn, maybe 0, but mostly 1 every turn, and be hitting a middling amount of damage, looking for like that mid to high hundreds to low 200s. You're probably not one-shotting 2 prizes most of the time, but you're also going to be pretty consistently 2-shotting them, and hopefully you can buy some time, take an extra prize somewhere, or stop your opponent from taking a prize somewhere. It's the only true single prize deck, honestly, we've had in such a long time. Lost Zone Box was not all single prizers. Snorlax is not all single prizers, and they certainly play weirdly. And this deck is not. It's I mean, you could argue it's weird, but I would not say so. I don't think most people would. It's pretty straightforward. You just go ahead and you do have some options as well, but oh, this deck only runs one fighting energy, but you do have Koraidon, you have Fluttermane, you have Roaring Moon, but they're all just solid single prize attackers that do have a little bit of utility, but are generally straightforward damage. Fluttermane's not, but Koraidon and Roaring Moon are. And you just do your thing, and you go kind of fast, but it's not like you're pushing yourself like super far as you could with Roaring Moon EX in the past, in which you essentially like lose all your stuff. Again, I'm not a massive fan of this deck, but I know some people are, and it's played a lot. It's a true single prize deck, and it's really the only one in the game. Next, we have Gardevoir. This deck's actually risen up a lot. I think there's a lot of debate on how good it is, but it's certainly pretty solid and pretty decently played. And the big thing, there's a lot of things to talk about with this deck, but the big one is that you're attacking with single prizers that can one-shot everything. I was saying, Lost Zone, most of your Pokemon are single prizers that don't one-shot everything, or there are some multi-prizes that like can one-shot stuff or things like that. But Gardevoir is single prizes that one shot everything. It does have some vulnerabilities, but the big thing is that you just one shot stuff. Notably with Drifloon, single prizer, but you stick a tool on, not the one that gives up an extra prize, but you do Bravery Charm, and you can one-shot most things, and there are certain, there's some stuff, Hero's Cape, Luxurious Cape as well, where you do give up an extra prize, things like that, but you do have a little bit of versatility, but you're mostly just a really powerful single prize attacking deck. Your main card in the deck is Gardevoir EX, which isn't a single prizer, but it's hopefully not in the active spot ever, or almost ever. And then you do have some versatility with Screamtail, Fluttermane, Mimikyu to kind of back up Drifloon, so you can punish certain things. And you do run Klefki as well, it's very common. And yeah, you're just a very solid single prize deck. You play like a single prize, you play with single prizers. Does it play like a traditional single prize deck? I don't know. I wouldn't say so. It's a slower setup based deck, which I know some people like as well a lot. I think a lot of people that play it like that. But it does have that single prize attacker, which is really good. It's really good. And because, if you're single prize or one-shotting multi-prizes, you're going to win. Next up, we got ourselves Giratina Lost on Box. We talked about Lost on Box. We talked about Arceus Giratina, and this is right in the middle. You got Giratina V-Star, your incredibly great attack. You can lean back on as your main option, and then you do have Radiant Greninja, Sableye, Cramorant, and Iron Leaf ZX as a specific attack to focus more on in certain matchups and when you have the opportunity to do them. But it's a deck that has enough consistency with Giratina V-Star and relatively consistent like engine stuff. Although I have said I think Switch card, or I'd run for Switch instead of Jet Energy. But uh, outside of that, you got a lot of consistency. You have like a pretty solid late game as Giratina V Star is just a very good attacker, and then you can actually one-shot stuff with Star Requiem. So again, you're a pretty resilient deck. This deck's been around and really good since it came out. It was a deck that was kind of packaged together with the expansion, as we saw with I was gonna say Gardevoir, but that's not really true. But like with Future Hands, Chimpa, Excalibur, Charizard, Pidgeot, Lugia, Archeops, Giratina, Lost in Box, all like the top five, at least most played decks are all decks that were all packaged together within one set for the most part, with Obsidian Flames, Temple of Forces, how they evolved, Silver Tempest, and then Lost Origin. So you see that like the boxed up packages are really good and have that like have enough options to do what they want, and Giratina V-Star does, as it has high HP, no weakness, good damage output, potential to one-shot everything, versatility on the V, and of course energy acceleration with Mirage Gate, and the powerful attacking options of the Lost Zone engine and Lost Zone deck, I should say. I mean, it's just a really solid deck. I think it's what I describe as the most solid deck, and if you want something in between Arceus Giratina and Lost Zone Box, it's perfect. It's a perfect deck to pick up. I don't know if I say as a new player, but someone exploring the game, wanting to see what the different options are. It's just really, and it's just a really good deck. It's arguably the best deck, honestly. Then we have Lugia Archeops, again, arguably the best deck. In this deck, what you have is you got a single prizer that one shots everything, but this like actually one shots everything. Once you're set up, you just go. You are evolution, so it's a little more awkward than Gardevoir, but Um, it's a little different than Gardevoir, but it's similar. It doesn't have that powerful draw engine of like the Curlier engine, but instead you don't need, you don't need to be playing these different cards. You just need your attacker. You don't need the energy. I guess Gardevoir you don't need the energy it's in discard, but you just get Chinchino. You just one shot everything. I also have Lugia V-Star and Archeops, but you just the big thing is Chinchino. Chinchino is so good. It does 70 it one-shot stuff. If you got Archeops and it's a single prizer and it has enough HP to not just die to literally everything, because Gardevoir's attackers, they will die to like a lot. They will literally die to Lost Vacuum. So Chinchino does not have that problem. Chinchino is super good with special roll, and you do have Snorlax, I think super underrated, but still very good. And Lugia V-Star's attack is pretty solid. You just have enough. Like once you're going, you can't really be stopped. They're controlled acts; they can't stop you. There isn't any really a way to punish special energy, not that much anyway. So you can just go ahead and Chinchino, or even Argaps or Lugia or Snorlax, and those are all very solid options. It's very like solid deck. I wouldn't call it a consistent deck, but it's a deck that there's really no stopping once it gets going. And yeah, it's really good. In the next expansion, I do feel like it is worth mentioning. I think it's gonna get a lot better. It's gonna get a lot more versatile. It's gonna be very different. But right now, it's just like a solid. I mean, it plays Master Ball, right? Master Ball is just like a card that you can. I'd describe as like a foothold almost. Like you can just use it, and it's just a nice little buff, and you got a really solid deck going where you just look at your gaps, then you just go and nothing can stop you. Versus as to like Gardevoir, I'd say they're kind of similar, but Gardevoir you can get like Lost Vacuumed, and you need all these Pokemon. Lugia, once you got your Pokemon, you're kind of good to go. Next, we have Chimpa Excalibur. I don't think this deck's quite as good as Lugia Archeops, but I think they're close. But the big thing about this deck is you just can take two prizes every single turn, no matter what your opponent's doing. Like in all positions. Of course, a lot of attackers are two prizes. You just go in with Chimpa, knock it out, take two prizes. Or your opponent's a single prizer, you go Iron Hands and knock it out, take two prizes. Or two prizes. Or you do Radiant Greninja and knock out two of your opponent's Pokemon and take two prizes. So pretty much you can just take two prizes every turn. And that's the number you need to win, because if you're taking one and then two, then you haven't won the game. If you take two, you've won, right? It's relatively straightforward there. You just go ahead and knock out three of your opponent's Pokemon, maybe four if you go Radiant Greninja. You can punish certain setups if your opponent misses a beat and you don't, then you just win. Um, and this is it. If they're a single prizer, there are certain single prizers like the ancient single prizers that you can't really deal with. But that's it. That's like literally it. If your opponent's running the barrel and they stick that in the active Iron Hands, if they get a couple of like I don't know, some weaker Pokemon. I was gonna say Bidoofs now, but like Bidoofs is immune. But if they have two Comfies, you Radiant Greninja, right? So you got like great options, and it's a relatively straightforward deck. It's a small deck list, not like the smallest, but pretty small. And you just do your thing. It's straightforward. I know some people who like the deck a lot, and you just go ahead and you attack. You Excalibur, and then you probably Chimpow, and then you attack. Or you could Iron Hands or Radiant Greninja, but you just attack and accelerate your energy and knock stuff out. Then Future Hands, this deck is overplayed. I'll be completely honest. Charizard's also overplayed, but Charizard's really good. Future Hands is good, but it's also overplayed. But the big thing about this deck is it's simple. I mean, it's really simple. You don't really have too many attacking options, and they're usually pretty obvious. Yes, of course, you can make mistakes, and people make mistakes, but you just attack, you get your basic Pokemon, and your supporters you just play them. Like, you just play whatever you have usually. It's probably the simplest deck in the game to play. And yeah, that's why it's so played, because it's easy and it's good. I don't think it's like it should be played like almost 9% of the meta, but it's pretty solid, and it's so easy that you can just kind of pick it up. I've actually taught a few people to play the game recently, and I've introduced them both using this deck because it's just so straightforward. And then lastly, we got ourselves Charizard. Charizard EX is just really good. There's not too much to say about it, but it's a really good card. It's kind of broken. Yeah, I've talked about Charizard a lot. A lot of people have talked about Charizard a lot, but it's really good. But anyway, that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider liking, subscribing, clicking the bell, all that good stuff. I wanted to make this video because I thought you'd be interested, and I hope you were. As I was, I'm excited to see you in the next video.